So moving ahead, we are joined, of course, we have been joined by a really special guest this evening, Suzie Dawson, who is a mentor of mine. And I want to make sure that we also highlight her situation and that we talk about what's going on with her, because it is all tied into many of the themes that we discuss on this vigil. I am the spokesperson for Suzie's campaigns, namely Protect Suzie. So if one of my co-hosts could put in the chat a link to the website, protectsuzie.com. This has a variety of sources of information discussing Suzie's case. Now, I know many of you are familiar with her, but in the unlikely event that you are not, Suzie is an investigative journalist and activist from New Zealand, and I want her to be able to have the opportunity to discuss her case with you all, and then we can open it up to the co-hosts and discuss this further. But Suzie, I want you to have the opportunity to share as much or as little as you would like for us.
Sure. So if there's specific questions that you want to ask me, I mean, I'm pretty aware, Taylor, that was a great introduction, but I'm pretty aware that Andrew and particularly Steve have for a very long time been wanting to get me on the vigil. And so if there are specific things that you want to pick my brain about or things that you're curious about, then I'm like more than happy to answer. To be honest with you, the last thing in the world I feel like doing is advocating for myself right now. Because I feel like the things that are going on are so much bigger than me and bigger than my situation. While that doesn't help me very much, at the same time, compared to like what's happening to Julian or compared to like what's happening to the planet, talking about my situation seems paltry by comparison. I can tell you, maybe I can just give a little bit of insight to what it's like to be me at the moment. I can tell you that seeing all of this coronavirus stuff is absolutely terrifying in terms of concern for the well-being for my family and friends in New Zealand, concern about not being able to do anything for them meaningfully or support them in any way, concern for my kids. I mean, my kids and I have lived in near total isolation for years. We have very little contact with people. It's almost like my very dark Kiwi sense of humor. And I think Snowden's as well, from his tweet tonight, where he said social distancing is underrated. I mean, Snowden knows a humongous amount about isolation. He knows exactly what isolation is. And I know what isolation is too. I've learned that in very hard ways in the last few years. Because our situation means that we can't just go and meet any random person that wants to meet us. We can't. We have language barriers. We have precarious legal status. I mean, I can't go on the trains. I can't do basic things because I am at risk of detention or deportation. I should, just as a general update on my situation, I did recently file an appeal, and it seems like I'm okay for the moment. Legally. My lawyer said, though, I've only got a matter of months. So I am in a precarious situation, but I'm in a okay for today situation, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's really absolutely horrible not knowing what's going to go on, especially being in a foreign country, not speaking the language fluently, not knowing what happens to us if basic local services start to go down. It is really concerning. What happens with the exchange rates? You know, what happens if I can't access at all money or resources? How do I take care of 2 kids? How do I do anything? I mean, I can't travel even if I want to. I can't leave the city even if I want to.
You can't work either, right?
I can't work. I cannot work. I cannot enroll my kids in school. I cannot, there's a very long list of things that I can't do, but I'm not in Belmarsh. And I mean, this is very real to me, is that I'm not in Belmarsh prison. I'm not there. I remember people used to ask Julian about his situation, and he used to say, I'm not in Iraq. I'm not in Syria. A bomb's not dropping on my house tonight. he saw that there were millions of people in the world who were in a worse physical situation than he was, and he felt that keenly. I feel the same. I feel like I'm not in Belmarsh prison right now. I'm not being tortured right now. I am actually, despite being really isolated and in a really precarious situation, I'm still safer than I was in New Zealand. No one's trying to drive me off a cliff today. No one's tampering with my vehicle today. No one's physically trying to harm me the way that I had people trying to physically harm me in New Zealand. And if anybody doubts that that was occurring to me, there you can go and look at my YouTube channel, and you'll see that people who knew me and worked with me in independent media in New Zealand have been coming forward and shooting video interviews about what they themselves saw and experienced in the targeting of me. The most recent one to step forward was actually in a vehicle with me when we were being boxed in by they appeared to be like undercover police, like late model V8 Holden Commodores boxing us in front and tail on a cliff as we were going up it. So this is not just me saying that this happened. This is the people around me also who witnessed it have been speaking publicly about that. So I feel it's a balancing. It's the yin and yang. It's like on one side my situation's terrifying. On the other side, I'm really freaking grateful. I'm really grateful that it's not worse. So yes, I do need support at the moment more than anything. I just need to be able to pay my rent. I'm going through every month is like being on a mouse wheel for me. I have just like basic cost of living that I've got to be able to meet. But beyond that, I don't feel like my situation is more important than other things that I'm seeing going on right now. And that actually makes me more reluctant to be advocating for myself and more feeling the urge and motivation that I need to be advocating for those who are in worse situations than me.
So guys, you did hear that Suzie is unable to work in Russia right now. This situation is very serious. I know, Suzie, you've always been so gracious in saying, well, I'm not in Belmarsh and it's not this bad, but I want to speak on behalf of you and tell you guys, please help her out if you can. Please, any amount of donations is helpful. So if you go to protectsuzie.com/donate, I believe you can donate there. Suzie is somebody whose work has been of such high value to so many people. And I want to make note of that as well. And you took it upon yourself when it was a very easy, probably not to do so, but you noticed that during the Occupy movement, while you were still in New Zealand, which you were very much involved in, that the corporate media was not covering it how they should or to the extent that they should. And so you took it upon yourself to really bring it to light and to address what was happening, and you wanted people to see these movements. And you became a journalist almost on accident. And despite the targeting that you have experienced, you still persevered and continued on with this work, which is something that is so admirable. I feel like so many people would have very easily just shut down and would have gone on with their lives and would have quit doing this very meaningful work. But Suzie chose not to do that. She chose to continue working basically on behalf of the people, really. So I want to make that clear. Again, guys, if you can help, please go to protectsuzie.com/donate. And Suzie, if you want to provide any more information on your background, your journalism, your activism, please do so. I know that my co-hosts probably have quite a few questions for you, but I want to give you the opportunity to add anything else that you would like to, and then Andrew and Steve, you could take it from there.
I would say that the work of Julian inspired me, the work of WikiLeaks inspired me, the work of Michael Hastings inspired me. I used to read Michael Hastings' columns before he was killed. Many people inspired me. Chris Hedges inspired me. In terms of why I didn't stop or give up, I felt like if I did, that I would actually be enabling and encouraging the people who were doing it to me, who were targeting me. I felt like if I allowed their targeting of me to be effective, that they would just move on to do it to other people, and that I would somehow be a part of that. I'd be a part of enabling them to continue to target other people. Whereas if I went the other way and doubled down and doubled down and doubled down and doubled down in my work, and also in speaking about what was happening to me, that had a better chance of either preventing them from using the resources they're using to target me to target other people, and that possibly maybe even I'd shine enough of a light to make them think twice about what they were doing. I definitely think that they have been made to feel some level of discomfort by the whatever level of exposure of my situation has managed to come to pass over the last few years. And that's good and right, because they need to be held accountable, and people need to understand what they're doing, because they're doing it on our money. They're doing it on public money. They're doing it under the guise of enforcing the law, under the guise of law enforcement. Trying to tell a story that spans a number of years in a few sentences. It's pretty much well-known established fact that the Occupy movement was spied on, it was infiltrated, but it was targeted by the FBI and the DHS in America, which we know because of FOIA requests that were made there. Unfortunately, that targeting was a worldwide endeavour, an international endeavour. And as with many other types of activists, Occupy activists were individually pursued by government agencies or by government subcontracting agencies in New Zealand. However, the privatisation of surveillance functions and the expanding private security industry meant that the targeting eventually expanded beyond just activists. And we know from a 2018 State Services Commission report in New Zealand that not only were up to a dozen New Zealand government agencies involved in hiring private security companies and private intelligence companies to target activists, but they began to target anybody who was causing any issue for government whatsoever. So it went beyond activism, beyond journalism, because we know also journalists were targeted in New Zealand. But it also went to state insurance claimants, victims of earthquakes who had filed insurance claims against the government, and even to historic state child sex abuse victims who had claims against the government. And so my concern around surveillance at the moment is that the private security industry calls these types of people, these different claimants against the government, calls them issue-motivated groups, IMGs. My concern is that once they have had their fill of targeting people involved in issue-motivated groups, that this is just going to straight up involve targeting entire populations. So we've seen that mass surveillance targets entire populations electronically or digitally. But my concern is that eventually this physical monitoring and physical targeting of citizens will expand to right across the society. And everything that I'm seeing and all the results of my research and journalism have pointed to that occurring. That's where we're getting to. Just as once upon a time, you guys, some of you might be old enough to remember when security cameras were like a new thing that were in a few places, and now security cameras are ubiquitous absolutely everywhere you go. I think the same thing is happening with the private intelligence and private security industries, where what started as we'll target a few radicals became we'll target all the activists, became we'll target the journalists, became we'll target anyone who's involved in any issue-motivated group, will eventually become the targeting, the lifelong too, because they're starting young. The Google Classroom software is basically surveillance of students, of elementary students, and the teachers become the spies. This is right across the span of your life that you'll be surveilled pervasively by ultimately actors in for-profit industries. So I think this is about the future of humanity. This is about the direction of humanity. So, but to me specifically, yes, I was targeted in a variety of ways, and it increased in severity over time. And the more issues that I got involved in covering in my journalism, the more activism I got involved in, the more severe the targeting became. In 2014, I was involved in some significant events in New Zealand, and Julian Assange and WikiLeaks started promoting my work. And that took it really up a notch as well, in terms of a greater visibility for me, a greater reach for my content, more people becoming aware of what I was doing. And then the flip side of that is even more increased targeting of me, and more extrajudicial punishment of me is the way that I would describe it. Because technically what they do to people might be legal because they've passed all this counter-terror legislation to try and cover themselves to do it, but morally, absolutely not. I mean, the types of things they do to people are just despicable, and in my opinion, indefensible. I am very interested to know. I know that Steve in particular has really, really closely followed my work. And I am really interested in hearing from any of you, any questions that you do have for me about my work. I'm very happy to answer.
I have a question more about encryption. So I personally see encryption as like the hand soap against global tyranny. Like, it's not the solution, but it's one of the things that can help keep it at bay, because they don't have the ability to directly intercept through mass dragnet programs. I was wondering if there was any like basic encryption technology that you would recommend for people, even if it's just like a messenger or a browser or something.
I don't like to propose encryption as like a catch-all solution, because it's definitely not. We don't know what the agencies have the ability to decrypt. We don't know if they have the ability to decrypt. We know that 6 years ago they couldn't break OTR encryption, but we don't know if they can in 2020 or not, and we don't know if they'll be able to in 2025. What they do with encrypted packets of data is they store them and keep them until they can decrypt them. And at some point in the future, they will be able to decrypt them. So basically, we also know from Snowden and WikiLeaks files that if you encrypt your data, that you can be targeted because you encrypt your data. But of course, on the other side of that coin is that if you don't encrypt your data, it is all being dragnetted anyway. So you can either be targeted by default because you don't encrypt, or you can be targeted for encrypting. Either way, they're going to hold that data, and they're either going to be able to see it and review it, or they're going to wait until they can see it and review it. Now, encryption is useful though in a number of situations. It is useful for preventing interception or intrusion by just like other hackers, like regular, like non-state actors that engage in hacking. You actually are more secure if you're using end-to-end encryption, and you are in the interim on the presumption that a state level actor can't decrypt it. In the interim, you are more protected, but in the long term, there's absolutely no guarantee whatsoever that you'll be more protected from using any encrypted messaging. But it is best practice to encrypt. It is preferable to just handing all your data to the governments. And I mean, I don't want to recommend any specific platforms personally around encryption. I'm sure you can web search like best encrypted chat apps or best encrypted email services if you're really particularly interested in picking one. It is very clear to me that there is a war on encryption by the intelligence agencies and by governments, there have already been examples internationally of laws being passed to force decryption keys to be handed over, or to introduce other measures for governments to target encrypted communications, particularly in Australia, also in New Zealand. Usually it's the border protocol, so it's around transiting in and out of a country in possession of encrypted data. But there are also attempts by Five Eyes to just basically outlaw encryption or to backdoor the programs that offer encryption services. So that's where things like no knowledge servers, etc., come in, are really important in terms of providers creating ways that they themselves don't even have the ability to decrypt information in order to prevent them needing to provide backdoor access to agencies. When a couple of months ago, I was searching up encrypted email platforms, and I noticed that of a list of about 20 of them that had been around a couple of years ago, more than half had been shut down, systematically shut down. So they get shut down, either they get acquired, like as an acquisition, and then they get shut down, or they are just targeted themselves or under massive financial pressure and get shut down, or just for whatever reason they can no longer continue to provide the services. And it seems to me that there's a real whittling down of this encrypted solutions that are on the market. I'm just saying that based on my observation and research. I think that they are trying to limit the spread of encrypted services. And I'd even go so far as to say that extends to the targeting of developers as well in the crypto space. There is every indication that developers who have specific InfoSec knowledge that is dangerous for whatever, or perceived as being dangerous to governments, are also being targeted by the agencies in the same types of ways that activists and journalists and others are being targeted. To be a talented, conscientious developer, an ethical developer that wants to develop solutions to protect citizens seems to put you on the shit list just as fast as if you are supporting WikiLeaks, or if you are involved in whistleblowing or the types of journalism that I've been involved in. And that is something that really concerns me, because the bigger picture that all adds up to is not just tyranny at a government level, but actually the inhibition of human progress as a whole. That's the fundamental role of the intelligence agencies, is to limit human progress. Is like we say things like maintain status quo, but when you're maintaining a status quo, what you're actually doing is preventing evolution. You're preventing social evolution. You're preventing social progress. And I see them doing that in the technological space. They're trying to prevent technological progress, inhibit technological progress. They are
at the same time coming up with the Neuralink shit and the cyber soldier shit. Did you see that?
Yeah, but the thing is that they want to control and direct the progress. I'm remembering in the Snowden files, they're talking about Wi-Fi. This is in like 2001, 2002. They're talking about, they're saying like Wi-Fi is going to be the next big access point, like this is going to be prevalent. But they know about it from the earliest days of the development of Wi-Fi, and they were talking amongst themselves about like, we've got to get on top of this. We've got to know how to compromise it, how to exploit it before it gets out into the market at all. And so they're really like 10 steps ahead of us, because they know what technologies are being developed before anyone else knows. They have the ability to meddle in the development of that technology, to alter the direction of the development of that technology, to limit the access to that technology and the release of that technology. It's impossible to overestimate the ability of the agencies to manipulate the development of any technology. They can straight up hack into these systems and meddle with it. They can implant human intelligence operatives to meddle in the companies that are producing it or are undertaking the R&D. They can meddle from the government side in terms of like policy, legislation. Like they have limitless ability to alter the course of the development of anything, be it a scientific development, a technological development, a human health services development, anything. They can decide we like this or we don't like this. This is the direction we want it to go in, and make it go in that direction. They corral technology, they corral people into the directions that they want them to go in to produce the outcomes they want them to go in, and they do this years before it's on the radar of any of us.
Absolutely. And there's that trickles down all the way throughout society. If you want people, dressing a certain way or behaving a certain way or reacting a certain way, all of that has a part to play in what you're talking about. I wanted to ask you about being Julian Assange.
Mm-hmm.
Because as vital of a survival kit and how-to handbook as the third part of freeing Julian Assange is, how long did it take you to put that together? Because it is one of the most sourced article series I have ever read in my entire life, and you can just tell immediately like the amount of research and literal hours spent on it. A little bit too, but I mean it's just like yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
So being Julian Assange was a rabbit hole. So I thought, I was going to write a 3,000 word piece, and then it was 7,000, and then it was 12,000, and then it was 20,000, and then I think I whittled it down from 27,000, got it down to about 24,000. So the final print is 24,000 words. I don't know how many screenshots or source links, but I'm sure well over 100. It took me 4 months of full-time research. So literally from when I woke up to when I went to bed every single day. And many conversations with Julian. So I was talking to him throughout it. Obviously I wrote it, he didn't write it, but I would ask him to confirm things if I needed a confirmation about something specific. I can tell you there are things that he did make some suggestions to me which I didn't actually employ, because I'm actually fiercely independent about my journalism and about what I write. I certainly listen to him and respect his opinion, but every word in that article was all the concepts discussed in it was me, my opinions, my experience, and in the context of my experience. What I wanted to do was to correct the record, because there were, at the time I wrote it, there were many myths, pervasive myths, not just the mainstream media public sphere myths, not just the Julian's a rapist or the whatever else. There was a concerted attempt to rewrite the history within activism circles as to Julian's accomplishments and WikiLeaks accomplishments and what Julian was involved in. And I felt compelled to intervene and to remind activists. And I mean, I obviously had a much larger readership. Hundreds of thousands of people read the article. It wasn't just activists that read it, but I really was writing it for the activism circles. I wanted to say to them, I want to remind them, hey, this is what actually happened. Like, this is how the support campaign for Chelsea Manning actually started. This is how, because when it was around the time Chelsea had been pardoned and was released, and there was this huge effort to try to pretend like WikiLeaks and Julian never had anything to do with it. They'd never supported her. All the first petitions to the White House to free Chelsea came from Julian and from WikiLeaks. And not only were they involved in setting up the original Chelsea Manning support network, but Julian was advocating for Chelsea and trying to protect Chelsea while he was in Sweden, well, like at the exact time that he was being attacked by the global media as a rapist, he wasn't spending his time just reacting to his situation. He was spending his time organizing in support of Manning. And I felt like that was something people really needed to be reminded of. There was also a real attempt, like quite, I think, malicious attempt to, or an unscrupulous attempt to rewrite the history around Aaron Swartz. There was an attempt to try to diminish his relationship with WikiLeaks, to try to pretend like he didn't really support WikiLeaks, or they weren't really close, and that Aaron's development of the secure drop technology was somehow removed from WikiLeaks secure Dropbox technology. And so I did a lot of research around that, and I found out that actually, contrary to what we were being told, Aaron Swartz was a fierce advocate for WikiLeaks. He was appearing on RT in different shows over and over and over again, publicly advocating for WikiLeaks in the strongest possible terms, promoting them. That Secure Drop at its very first, at its launch events, was being advertised as being a direct connection, a direct step on from WikiLeaks Dropbox, and that Aaron Swartz, which I do confirm in the article, had worked on WikiLeaks submission platform. So it wasn't just that he had an idea that was similar to WikiLeaks. He had directly worked with WikiLeaks on their submission platform. And this was all being turned into forgotten history. It was, or not even just forgotten, it was being rewritten. And I felt like that was really wrong, and that there needed to be like a definitive clearing of the air around what actually happened in those years. And also it even extended to the reasons for the targeting of Aaron Swartz, because the official story that's referenced by all the mainstream media is that he was targeted because of the JSTOR hack, and it was all MIT's fault, and blah. It was all bullshit. He was targeted because he was a close associate of Julian Assange working on WikiLeaks technology. That's why he was targeted. The JSTOR hack and the MIT situation is like just a giant cover story that has been conveniently adopted to cover up the fact that he was a state-level target because of his associations with WikiLeaks. He was seen as, for all the reasons that I was just saying, I was just talking a few minutes ago about developers of conscience, talented, conscientious developers being targeted. Aaron Swartz was exactly that. He was seen as a threat for that reason, and also because he was working with Julian himself is one of the top developers. We don't often talk about him in that context, but Julian was one of the best in that field, in the technology field. He was the architect. He was, from a technological perspective, Julian was the architect of that software. But no one wanted to give him credit for that.
Well, that was also what, 2017, 2018. He had already been basically deemed persona non grata by the Freedom of the Press Foundation. He was getting it from all over the place. Well, at least when you wrote the article. So it's vitally important that we take steps to present an accurate view of history, present things as they truly are. And I make a point on Slow News Day to say that independent media's job isn't only to combat the rewriting and the whitewashing of history, but it's to combat the rewriting of real time as it happens. And the fact that Julian Assange was able to have an organization that did just that thing, that organization continues, it's a testimony to the necessity. But you've been doing this for quite a while now, and if anybody that's watching this, has the same kind of questions that I do typically, what do you think are the more effective ways to combat the rewriting of real time?
That's a fantastic question, and I'm not sure that I have the solutions. I think freeing Julian Assange is a big part of it, because I think that WikiLeaks is the bulwark that protects a lot of us in the independent media sphere. And my biggest fear all along, which I think is a very well-founded fear, is that if they do away with Julian once and for all, they are systematically coming for everybody else. I have no doubt about that, actually. The number of resources employed against, there are literally over 1,000 agents that have been employed to target WikiLeaks.
And their own task force. There was a WikiLeaks task force.
Yeah, that's only one of the agencies as well, because there is a number of agencies that are involved, but over 1,000 agents working full-time. Like, what can 1,000 agents do to the independent media sphere? You know, if they are done with targeting WikiLeaks, that's my concern.
What they can do is supplant it with a zirconium version of the independent media, where you're still like hitting the basic, you know, you're checking off all of the quote unquote like progressive or quote unquote like, you know, libertarian or whatever boxes. They're all being checked. But at the end of the day, you're still encouraging people to participate in the duopoly. You're still encouraging people to, you know, only focus on what's happening during election season, and that voting is more important than getting out into the streets and communicating with people in real time, and not just having a conversation through a screen, but being able to be in the presence of another person to have a conversation. That's one of the most effective ways for activism that I've found, is like actually just going up and talking to people about it. You know, it's great optics to be able to pull off a successful march. It's great optics to be able to pull off a successful protest, and hopefully it draws the attention that gets the public into it. But you're still going to have those conversations on an individual basis, or at least on a smaller group basis, before they sink in.
I think in terms of potential solutions, teaching everybody to be the media is actually, I mean, that's something we've tried to do since Occupy, and to a certain degree it has happened. I think your average citizen is fully aware that they can pull out a cell phone, film something and upload it. That wasn't the case during Occupy days. During Occupy days, we had a streamer, and then we had 4 streamers, and then we had a dozen streamers. And slowly it's grown to where now everybody knows they can stream, everybody knows they can get content out there. And that is really important. I feel that we have an obligation to, how did we word it? We did a statement on this topic that you'd really like back in Occupy days, and it was, we said that it falls upon the public to provide the services for themselves, for which media are duty bound to. Media is supposed to be a public service. It's literally supposed to be a public service. It's not supposed to be a for-profit service. It's not supposed to be a private service. It's not supposed to be. It's not supposed to be have restricted accesses. It will be paywalled. It's supposed to be a public service. It's supposed to, like doctors have the Hippocratic Oath. You know, journalists are supposed to serve the public. And where they fail to do so, it falls upon us to provide those services for ourselves. And that is the ethos of citizen journalism, is that if the media will not tell the truth, if they will not cover the events that are occurring, if they will not inform the public, that we as citizens must rise in their place and pick up that slack and do it for ourselves. And I believe very strongly in that. And I believe in the equal playing field of everybody having the capacity and ability to do that. And that's why I try really, really hard to platform people who are trying to do that, and yourselves are all included for that reason. And Julian very much believed in that. Julian gave platforms to so many people that wouldn't have otherwise had. He constantly lifted people up. he constantly raised people up, raised voices up from all around the world that were being suppressed for whatever reason. You look at the core founding statement of WikiLeaks, it's all about finding suppressed information, suppressed voices, and platforming them and preserving them for all time. And so I very much feel that I owe my platform and my following to that same mission, to find other voices and to raise them up and give them as much of a boost as I can, in the same way that Julian did for me and for countless other people.
Yeah,
absolutely. And yeah, we thank you for all the guidance that you have given us, because I know that we have reached out to you when we had questions about how to do this, how to manage this, and you've really been a model for that. And you've been a mentor to me, and I know I said that earlier on the vigil, but we're all very, very grateful. And you've really been a supporter of ours since the beginning. Suzie, before we do all close out, before I even get to the final thoughts, I want to remind everybody to please visit protectsuzie.com. If you can help out in this situation, any small donation is, I know, is going to be really appreciated and is helpful. So go to protectsuzie.com/donate. Also follow the campaign on Twitter @ProtectSuzie. And go to Suzie's YouTube channel as well, Suzie 3D. There is so much information on there that you cannot find anywhere else. The 1 versus 5i teach-ins is a great example of that. Excellent material, excellent stuff. A breakdown of issues related to the intelligence agencies and just abuses of power and corruption that you are not going to find elsewhere. So do check out her YouTube channel. Again, that is Suzie 3D. And like I said, go to protectsuzie.com, check out that timeline. It's quite extraordinary what you will find there. It lays it all out, the targeting as it aligned with her different movements and her involvement in those movements. So again, do visit that website, protectsuzie.com. The Twitter, again, is @protectsuzie. Suzie, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you with us. I am so happy you were able to join us. I know it's not a very convenient time for you. But before we do kind of go around, and before I do discuss London and what it was like to be there, I want to give you an opportunity to leave us off with a final message that you have. And thank you again.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about Action for Assange for a minute, actually. I've had very little to do with Action for Assange from an organizing perspective. You guys have, I may have mentored you personally in some capacities in terms of independent journalism, but I have had nothing to do whatsoever with the actual organizing work that you guys have done, or the events that you do, or your vigils. You guys have got your own guests, done your own thing. And I'm really proud of everything that you've done. I'm extremely proud of everything that you've done. And I think your work speaks for itself. I particularly wanted to congratulate you on the hookup with Activism Munich and on the London footage, which was amazing. The work that was done in London was great. Activism Munich is one of the absolute top activism organizations in Western Europe. They have worked with everyone who's anyone. They have interviewed anyone who's anyone. They are absolutely top-notch and so well respected, and the fact that they are attracted to your work is a reflection of the merits of your work and the quality of your work. And I think that you should be doing some serious back padding around that, because it speaks to your integrity and to the volume of content, of great content that you have already produced. And I know that you're still a very young organization. You've got like a long way to go, but I think that was a really important milestone. And to see you being accepted by organizations like Popular Resistance and Code Pink is absolutely huge. To see you working with people like Activism Munich is huge. And I'm just super proud of you for achieving that. I think that's just really fantastic and really exciting. And I think you guys are going to do amazing things in, the decade to come. I think there's like nothing but a bright future that I see for you. And I think it's just really cool. It's really satisfying watching you grow and watching you innovate and seeing you do what you do. And I'm very happy to come on and talk with you guys finally. I'm sorry it's taken so long. Obviously, I haven't been doing like any media really or anything recently. I've been concentrating more on IRL stuff, on my legal cases and things like that. But I'm very happy to be here, and I do support you. I will retweet you, always have, always will retweet you and amplify you in whatever way that I can. And one day it will be you, Taylor, doing media training with other activists and passing on that information. And one day it will be you as a group fostering other activism groups and helping to give them a leg up and sharing your platform and your reach with them. It's all about paying it forward. I remember Min Rays, who's a fantastic Canadian activist, saying the movements come in waves and the new activists come in waves with them. This is not a static moment in time. This is part of a cycle. Just as the older activists pass the information to the newer activists or the younger activists, those younger activists become older activists that pass the information to the younger and the newer activists. So we're part of a life cycle. So much of what I know about activism came from me being mentored by much more experienced, much more knowledgeable people than me, of which Julian is exponentially more knowledgeable and experienced than I am. So it's cool that there are people who look up to me, but I'm walking in the footsteps of those who came before me. And you guys will walk in the footsteps of those who mentor you, but one day you will be the activists who new activists will be walking in the footsteps of, and they will look up to you in the same way. So it's one of the more beautiful aspects of activism is that solidarity. Many times I've said solidarity is life. Solidarity is it's the lifeline. It's the lifeblood is the solidarity. Because when you have forces against you of the size and resource that we do, solidarity is what keeps you alive and keeps you together and keeps you going. It is everything. The activists who stood shoulder to shoulder with me in New Zealand are why I'm still here. They're why I am where I am. People like Julian who stood up for me, no matter what, they are the people, that solidarity. I've said this so many times. I remember saying this to Christine as well, saying Julian understands solidarity. He understands the power and the importance of solidarity. So that's the only thing that I'd really leave you with, is to remember that as you receive solidarity, so you pay it forward to others. It is a two-way transaction, and it is everybody's obligation to pass that on to the newcomers. And other than that, I'm going to sign off now and leave you to do your wrap. But the only other thing I would just say on a personal note is, babe, come and talk to me, and I will say goodbye to all you guys. Good night.